If you want to make some big changes to your garden or do a complete garden redesign, or maybe you've just moved into a house, what do you really need to know? It's Alexandra here from the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel and blog, and I'm with award-winning garden designer Polly of Pollyanna Wilkinson Garden Designs, and she's going to tell us what we need to know so that we can have the most beautiful garden possible, but also so we avoid making expensive mistakes. I'll put links to Pollyanna Wilkinson Garden Design in the description below, along with any other resources and timestamps. And if you're new here, the Middlesized Garden uploads every week with tips, ideas and inspiration for your garden. So if you'd like to see the videos when you open up YouTube, then tap the subscribe button. And if you'd like YouTube to tell you when a new video is uploaded, tap the notifications bell. One of the best awards, I think, that Polly won is the People's Choice Award in the RHS Hampton Court Garden Festival 2019. And what's so special about the People's Choice is it's awarded by the garden visitors, and that's people like you and me, for the garden they'd really most like to see in their own garden. And so that's why I have asked Polly to tell us how you can make a garden look gorgeous if you're not a garden designer, and also a bit about what you need to know if you are thinking about hiring a garden designer. So how do we start? If you're not a garden designer and you just want to change your garden around, how do we start doing that?
So we're going to start by measuring up our garden. I recommend you actually take a quick look on Google Earth. It can be really helpful just to get an idea of the shape, because sometimes your garden is a different shape to what you actually think. So first up, let's measure up your garden and then draw it out. It doesn't need to be fancy, just on a piece of paper. Then what we're going to do is look at sunlight. So maybe you like sitting in the sun, maybe you like sitting in the shade, but we need to understand where the light falls in your garden so we can plan where your seating areas are going to be, and also so we know what plants can go where in terms of sunlight. Then we're going to think about maintenance. And I think this often gets forgotten, but are you a gardener, or do you just want to enjoy your garden and not really spend every weekend working at it? So we need to consider how many plants we're going to put in and what kind of plants. And then finally, when we're thinking about how to plan it, we're going to think about how you want to use your space. And this is probably the most important piece. Are you going to use it to entertain? Is it for kids to play in? Are you going to work in it or exercise? There are so many different things and everyone's different, but you need to consider its use, because that will inform what you put in your garden.
I've heard advice that when you're actually starting to plan it out, you should put the largest features, sort of things like a swing bench or perhaps a terrace or a table or something like that first, or a tree. So would you say, and then you fill out the rest around that. What would you say to that advice?
I like quite a holistic approach where once we've drawn the plan, you're thinking, what are those key features? So they might be large, but they might be small, but it's what is the most important thing. So if you're wanting, for example, a large dining area, then we need to map that out, as you say, quite early on. But also we need to think, where's the trampoline going? Where's a football pitch? Where's an outdoor kitchen? So those key elements that are non-negotiables for you need to be mapped out first. But it needs to all feel cohesive. So that's why I always recommend that we do this 2D, looking down, lay out the space, and then fill in the gaps.
And what about garden style? How would you recommend that we think about our garden style? Do we have to link it to our house, or what would you suggest there? For a lot of people, the style of their house is quite modern, and it's not necessarily a strong, distinctive style.
So when you're picking a style, I mean, first and foremost, it's your garden and you have to love it. So the style needs to be what you love and what's going to make you happy. But there are ways of tying that to your house. So if I'm picking materials for outside, I'll often look at what materials are used on the rooms adjacent to the garden, just so that we can at least have a nod to the house, because your interior and exterior are in conversation with each other. So it can be a little jarring if you've got a very, very modern interior and then a very country garden. But there are ways of blending the two through colours and through feel and through texture. So I think most importantly, as I said, think about the style that you love, look at your house and your interior and how you can translate that feel outside, inside, and you can always mix things up with planting.
I've got a video which has got 12 garden styles, so I'll put that in the description below, which might help people. But you mentioned materials. Now, is there any other advice that you need to give when people are choosing materials for things like paths, fencing, etc.?
Definitely. So when it comes to urban gardens, where most of us have fences, like I do, I always recommend going dark. This really works well in urban gardens because if you paint a fence dark, it recedes and it means the plants really pop in front. So I would certainly consider that. It can feel a bit scary, but you just have to lean into those dark colours. When it comes to materials, it's also worth remembering that not all paving is created equal, and it's really worth doing your homework. You've got natural stones, which are going to age. They're more porous, but I think, they're natural, so there's a real appeal to them and they're going to age into your garden. And then you've got the man-made options, such as porcelain, which is a really no maintenance option, but it's not going to have that charming aged character. It's going to remain more or less after a jet wash, as is.
And what about things like gravel? Do you have a view on whether gravel is a good thing? People I know see it as a cheap option, but personally, having had gravel in my garden, I know you have to top it up every 5 years.
I use gravel a lot in gardens because it's a great option. It's brilliant for drainage and it's a lovely choice when maybe you've got paving, you've got lawn, you've got planting and you just want to fill in some of those gaps. And it can be a really nice contrast with stone if you match the colours too. I think it's important to think about what size gravel you choose. Obviously too small and it's going to get stuck in your shoe, and too big can look wrong in the wrong space. It's more, the larger gravels go for example, a driveway. But one tip I would say is it's great to have it on a stabilisation grid because that just levels everything out and it stops the migration of the gravel.
So what about plants? What do you think people really need to remember about plants when they are choosing them?
So it's really easy to focus on the fun ones and all the flowering plants for spring and summer, but actually we need to start with our structure. So when I'm doing a planting plan, I'll always think about the structure first, and structure usually means trees and shrubs, particularly evergreen shrubs. So that needs to go in first. Yes, it's more of an investment, but without it, your garden is going to look very boring for 6 months of the year and fabulous for the other 6. So we start with the evergreen structure and the trees. Think about height. You don't want everything to be this level. You're thinking the trees need to bring the height, shrubs will bring the medium, and then you've got what I think is the funnest bit, which is the perennials. So those are the things that are usually going to die back in autumn and winter and then come back full force spring and summer. And then finally, you've got your bulbs, which are often overlooked and are vital because we live in a cold and dark country and it's really lovely to have that spring zesty colour injection in March, April, May. So by planning your bulbs carefully, you can get a lot of colour for 3 or 4 months of the year.
And of course we haven't mentioned annuals, and of course I don't know if you use a lot of annuals. You've got a wonderful perennial garden here, I can see, but annuals, just for people who don't know, is plants that flower, set seed and die all in 1 year. They don't come back. What do you think?
Annuals are absolutely brilliant if you're a gardener. I tend not to specify them where people are asking for a low maintenance garden because exactly as you say, they need replacing every year. But they are brilliant, exactly as you've suggested, for filling those gaps, particularly in late summer, and I wouldn't be without cosmos.
But if you're going to have annuals on a regular basis, you've really got to be someone who likes that whole business of buying small plants and bringing them up and deadheading them and then pulling them out at the end. So what about a colour scheme for the plants?
So I tend to think of colours in terms of the seasons. So I'll certainly have a colour scheme in mind for that spring, summer flow where everything's at its most colourful, and then I'll also start thinking about what's going to be in colour in autumn and in winter if we think about things like dogwoods. So it might be that there's an overarching theme, such as clients will often say that they love either a green and white garden or they absolutely love purple, and I'll try and weave that through. But it's more for me about the seasonal colour and making sure you've got colour in spring, colour in summer, interest in autumn, and then evergreen interest in winter. So it might be, if we're going for let's say purple and white garden, it will mostly be purple and white, but it can be really nice just to add in a few pops of orange because that can really offset the purple as well. So it can be an overarching theme, but it doesn't mean it has to be really, really strict.
And what about things like hedges, fences, walls, boundaries generally?
So in urban gardens, most of us have fences, as I've said, so I would always go for a dark colour fence in an urban garden. So where possible, if you have fences, think about going dark and then think about growing plenty of climbers. Evergreen jasmine, Trachelospermum jasminoides, is an absolute classic for this. It will grow in most aspects, it smells amazing, and it will cover a fence so that you've got a beautiful green wall. When it comes to hedges, I absolutely adore adding hedges, and it can be trickier in an urban garden where space is at a premium. But in larger gardens, I would absolutely always encourage that we use hedges as boundaries, not only because it looks beautiful, but it's also friendly for wildlife.
And walls presumably would be quite expensive. I mean, beautiful, but quite expensive to build if you haven't got one.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a sucker for a dry stone wall. If I could have dry stone walls everywhere, I would. But as you say, that can come down to a budget.
So how do you sort the paths in a garden?
Paths in a garden, that's interesting. So, I mean, as with all gardens, you need to consider your journey. Is that journey over a lawn, or does that journey need to happen over, as you say, a pathway? Is up for debate. If, for example, you've got an office at the end of the garden, you need to choose, do you want to walk over lawn in the winter and get dirty shoes? Or do you want a pathway, which means sacrificing some of the precious lawn that I know people are usually quite keen to hold on to? So with pathways, I always think keep them to a minimum, and they should be for a reason. So I don't like to have a pathway just for the sake of having a pathway. For me, they are a means to get to other areas of the garden.
And presumably, of course, that means that in a way, once you've drawn up your features, the path should be fairly obvious. Do I need a path here? If I do, it goes from A to B.
Exactly. And some don't need to be great big paths. Sometimes it can be a little bit more secretive. So it can be that it's, stepping stones within planting, or it can be concealed. And also, a little bit of a design trick here, paths don't have to be straight. It can be more interesting when you actually dogleg a path so that you're walking towards plants, you have to change direction again. It makes for a more interesting pathway.
And would it be right to say that in that case you probably do need to make sure that there's some planting on either side of the path to stop people from just cutting across?
Preferably. Unless you want that very clean look of having lawn to a pathway, which can lend itself quite nicely for more contemporary gardens.
So what about water features?
Yeah, water features get a really mixed reception actually, because they are maintenance. Water features do break and they do require looking after. So where people want a water feature, we'll always talk through the level of maintenance going to be required. So bear in mind, if there's young children in the garden, then you probably don't want a big open body of water. So we need to think about safety concerns as well. But I love a water feature in a garden for white noise, and also because it's really great for wildlife.
And what about garden lighting?
I love to add garden lighting. I think it completely eliminates that black mirror effect that we have in this country, where it's very dark outside, you're sat inside and you're just looking at your reflection. So just having a small amount of lighting, uplighting feature trees or particular pathways, or if you've got any sculpture in the garden, it could be a really nice addition. It's just a case of being very tempered with it. Less is more. And also, again, you can really consider the impact on wildlife by making sure that lights face downwards.
So if someone decides that they really can't get the beautiful garden they want on their own and they'd like to hire a garden designer, then what would your advice be then?
I would do some research into that garden designer, shop around, have a look at their portfolio and have a look at their website, and make sure you like what they do, because most of us have got a bit of a signature style. So I would pick someone who speaks to your aesthetic. Have a chat, make sure that you like them. You're going to be spending a lot of time with them. It's a very collaborative process, so it's important that you get on. And then it's just worth thinking about, number one, a garden design is an investment, but actually having a garden design can end up saving you a lot of money in costly mistakes, clever use of materials, and also in terms of getting quotes from landscapers. You have an extremely detailed plan with every material, every measurement, lighting, everything specified out, so that you'll be able to nail down a very accurate quote.
One of the things I've seen in gardens, particularly this year for some reason, is where people have put in steps and they haven't realised that garden steps have a different proportionate riser to house steps, and they've got their house builders to put the garden steps in and they're too steep.
Absolutely. Some of the most common mistakes I see are things like patios for dining spaces which are just too small, as you say, steps which are too steep or too shallow, planting borders which are too tiny, and the mass and the void, the ratio of plants to hardscape is just off. So again, I know it can sound like an investment, but I really believe that it can actually save a lot of money and heartache in the long run.
And speaking of money, I know these things is very much what you need, where you live and everything like that. It's impossible to put a price on it. But sometimes there is a sort of calculation that people make in terms of a percentage of the value of your house. What about that?
Yes, I mean, most estate agents say that doing your garden up can add 10 to 15% of the value of your property. And so in terms of spend, it's not unusual to expect to spend about 10% of the value of your property on your garden. But that's a very rough guesstimate.
If you'd like to know more about garden design, there's a Best Garden Designs Videos playlist at the end of this video. And also you might like to follow Polly on Instagram, Pollyanna Wilkinson, because she does some great garden design tips and also gardening tips there. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.